Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Bordeaux Show, an ongoing exploration of the famed region and its wines. I'm Ron Edwards, Master Sommelier and Director of Wine Education here at Winebow. We invite you to place any and all questions or comments in the Q&A. We won't be monitoring the chat window, so just concentrate on the Q&A. Let me introduce your host, Certified Bordeaux Educator, TJ Griffin. TJ has held many jobs within the wine industry, from hospitality to wholesale. Throughout his career, what he enjoyed most was learning about wine and sharing that knowledge with others. As the corporate wine educator for Winebow, he now enjoys the privilege of doing what he loves full time. And now, here to discuss today's topic, the families of Bordeaux, Margaux, and Saint-Julien, specifically TJ Griffin.
Hello. Hi, Ron. How are you?
I'm well. I'm very well. It's good to see you, if only virtually. And I'm ready to talk about these two elite and wonderful regions. And Saint-Julien is my favorite region on the left bank.
Yes, I want to delve into that because I don't know if I've never done a poll, but I'm not sure if that's one of the popular first choices for Saint-Julien. But we'll see. It certainly deserves its reputation. So we're going back to the Médoc. Part 3, and I was thinking about this, Ron. Someday when we reboot this in the Marvel universe, I might just do a whole episode for each of these appellations because they're so dense. There's so much to talk about, but we can't do it in this original series. So next time when we reboot with a different Spider-Man,
You're driving. If you want to revisit and go back and just do Saint-Julien by itself, go right ahead. It's your webinar. You can do whatever you want. You get to make the rules.
Well, we'll cover Saint-Julien and Margaux today, but next time in 2024 when we reboot, we'll, maybe go solo because there's so much information on these two appellations. Well, I mean, as well as Saint-Estèphe and Pauillac, which we did last time. So there we go. We're going to be focusing on those. We'll start off with Saint-Julien. Saint-Julien is your favorite. So before we get into the details, because I don't want to get people on one side or there, what makes it your favorite appellation in the left bank?
I think a lot of it is my affinity for some of the specific chateaus that are made there. Léoville is my favorite red Bordeaux. And I think a lot of it, for me, experiencing Saint-Julien in its final in its final drinkable form is about this tremendously elegant, not lacking in power, but always elegant wine that really appeals to my sensibilities. Because while I'm not afraid of powerful wine, my favorite wines are always those that are to the side of subtlety and elegance as opposed to power and intensity. And I suppose I guess I wouldn't, maybe I'm inconsistent in the idea that I love Barolo and Barbaresco, but in Barolo and Barbaresco, I'm still looking at the producers I love the most are the ones that are the more elegant, refined styles. So I think part of it's me, as it should be, right? Everybody has their own personal taste and what they like. And the rest of it, I think, is what Saint-Julien offers is really attractive, no matter who you are. If you like Cabernet-based wines, Saint-Julien's pretty amazing stuff, top to bottom.
Absolutely. So there's two main villages, Saint-Julien, of course, and Béchevel, and the appellation it can be referred to as Saint-Julien Béchevel. Fairly small, no first growths, but a number of class growths here. And I believe about 80 to 85% of the vineyards are class growths here in Saint-Julien. So that's quite a bit. Supposedly, and maybe this speaks to what you are saying, is because of its proximity to both, Margaux and not too far away, Pauillac. It combines a little bit of each, sort of the elegance of Margaux and the power and firm structure of Pauillac. So I don't know if that's what you're kind of referring to, that elegant side, but still structured and sturdy. two of the chateaux from the original classification in 1855, Langoa Barton and Léoville Barton, are still owned by the same family, which is interesting. The only two in the left bank. The largest chateau that is a cru classé, Château Lagrange, is in Saint-Julien. And if you go back in time, we'll talk about this when we get to the chateau, but once upon a time in Saint-Julien, a large portion of it was one estate, the Léoville estate, which is now divided up into 3 chateaux. So there we see where it is located, and in the commune of Saint-Julien-Bechevel, and then little parcels and others, including in Pauillac. But here, more than any of these major appellations that we're talking about in the left bank, very homogeneous terroirs. There's this big rectangle of just pure gravel soils of relatively even depth. I believe it's like a 2 by 3 mile rectangle of just these gravel soils, and that's where everybody is planted. And the really one of the biggest effects on the terroir is the proximity or lack thereof to the Gironde. You're no matter where you are in Saint-Julien, you're close, but as we've discussed, I think in past, and we've talked about that maritime influence from the water. The closer you get, it's maybe subtle, but is definitely an influence. What do I want to tell you about Saint-Julien? Yeah, of course, Cabernet Sauvignon dominant. I don't think that needs to be said because we're on the left bank, but very small relatively, but very densely planted. They're taking advantage of every square foot here. And there is, I won't say which of the websites I got this off of, but this is what they put up for Saint-Julien. And it's a very beautiful photo run, but it's a little on the spooky.
Halloweenish.
Yes, I'm not sure what we're going for here.
And Saint-Julien, rest in peace.
Saint-Julien is the most haunted of the left bank. No,
I do find the wines very haunting.
Yes.
In their
well, there we see profile. The gravel soils of which we're talking about. So some numbers, about 6% of the vineyard, 6.2 million bottles average production, and 19 wine growers. And here we go, the 11 cru classés, 1 cru artisan, and 7 other growths. And this is again subjective, but we like to talk about styles, so the sort of general style. And this is, I believe this is a photo of David. There was some sort of construction going on, so we couldn't get the full photo. But
I appreciate that. For once, he was being a little shy. He was imitating Adam, apparently.
Yes, of course. So he's being modest today. But as is sometimes the case when you're describing something, Saint-Julien is often described by what it is not. It is not, it's elegant, but not quite as elegant as Margaux. It's powerful and firm, but not quite as powerful and firm as Pauillac, as we're talking about. So to me, and I think you agree with this, it's just really solid, balanced, very classic Bordeaux. This is a good, typical Saint-Julien Chateau wine in a good vintage is I think what a lot of people picture in their minds from a left bank Bordeaux.
I think that I like the idea of the David sculpture as a description, because whether David really looked like this or not is another question. But the idea of, it's not that Saint-Julien isn't powerful, but it's powerful in the way that a decathlete or a triathlete is powerful, where it's lean, but it's strong. It's not lacking in depth, but it's not really broad either. It's not a weightlifter or a shot putter. It's someone who can run fast, throw hard, and stay the course of longevity in the bottle. And I think that is so well displayed in its top wines, like Léoville, which, that's my favorite wine out of Bordeaux. But it also comes through in some of the lower classes like Talbot, which continues to be a great wine at a lower classification than second growth. And the wines are like that. They have that really fit athlete sort of feel to them. And maybe that's why I like them so much, is that they're not overly broad.
Well, it's funny you mentioned decathlete, because when I was putting these presentations together, I was thinking of like doing different types of athletes for each of these appellations, and that's exactly what I was going to put for Saint-Julien, just that well-rounded, all-around, strong but not, super muscular and fast and quick, and just, Saint-Julien kind of does it all the events. So here we go. That's your favorite Saint-Julien property right there.
Mm-hmm. So delicious. And
this
unfortunately, these days, so expensive.
Yes. So this is a clos. This is a walled vineyard, and this is the wall. But it's not going to keep too many people out. I guess you just have to. I assume if you crawled over the wall, eventually someone would drive up and tell you to get out. Right? It's not. You can't just walk around there.
One would think, yes, but any decathlete could hurdle it probably.
Yes. And certainly David, he's pretty tall. He could.
David, yeah. That statue, having seen it in person, is really crazy. It's like, wow, because I think it's like 9 feet tall on its own, and it's standing up on top of this platform, and it's impressive.
So according to the source that I like to use, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, because I want to give them credit, this is a very firm, austere, powerful, and yes, the word classic style of left bank Bordeaux from Léoville Lascombes. Some people say it resembles a first growth Pauillac, but very typical, very traditional Bordeaux. Usually, especially in a really good vintage, you're talking 15 to 20 years of aging to really start to soften and show its full potential. I don't know what your experience with older Léoville Lascombes, but it's a shame because I think we're losing that tradition. We talked about it in a different episode, maybe last time, about there's just not as much aging going on as there used to be in the Chateau. To some degree, are responding to that and making earlier drinking softer styles, but I'm not sure that's the case with Léoville Lascombes, and I don't think they have to. I think they can do what they want to do.
Yeah, and honestly, the wines are so well crafted that these wines drink well young too. And so people don't necessarily feel the motivation to age them to find out what they're going to be like, because honestly, they taste mighty good not far after release. I don't have tremendous experience with older, I think in the 20, 25-year-old range is probably the oldest Léoville Lascombes I've had. I think the older bottles I've had have been from the 80s, but I kept getting older and they were still in the 80s kind of situation, as opposed to going back 20 years from 1996 or something.
Yeah, I'm always a little jealous of the people that, the top buyers and writers that get invited to En Primeur and they can taste year after year all these great chateaus and have a really good bank of notes. So that's why I depend on them for some of this research. One thing to note, as I said, there was a massive property in Léoville, which was split into 3 eventually: Lascombes, Poyferré, and Barton. And interestingly enough, the Léoville Lascombes and Léoville Poyferré share a parking lot. So you park in one lot, and then you can go to either one or both if you have the time.
It's remarkably efficient. I would not have expected that at all. I guess those were the split in the family that were super friendly with each other, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And the Barton.
And when the family split and the British, Barton's is he Scotch or Irish?
Barton, I don't know. I think it might be Irish.
Yeah, and that family obviously like, no, we're not. You can't share a parking lot with us. You're not from France. I don't know.
We're gonna have our own parking. Speaking of which, there's Léoville Poyferré. This is a style that's a little bit more showing the elegant side of Saint-Julien. So ripe fruit, lush texture, but powerful plush style. So I think it's important to note, though, because we'll be talking about this with Margaux as well. When we say plush and lush and all that, it is still the left bank of Bordeaux, and these are still Cabernet dominant wines. So it's really kind of in relation to each other. In isolation, if you taste one of these wines, you're not going to say, oh, that's so soft. And these are not Burgundy, these are Bordeaux. But for Bordeaux in that style, and that's what we're trying to do, is sort of differentiate between the different appellations and the different major chateaux.
Yeah,
so,
the times I've tasted them, I think I would just describe them as, in the family of Léoville, I would describe this wine as less taut. It's just a little less compact. Still quite delicious.
I don't have as much experience with this. Well, not that I have a ton of experience with any of these top chateaux, but I'm not sure if I've ever actually had Léoville Poyferré. I don't think I have. And there's Château Léoville Barton, or is that Château Léoville Barton? Talk about that in just a second. But one of the interesting things about this, you know, a lot of these chateaux have changed hands over time. This Barton family is the same family that started Barton and Guestier, which is still around, more at the entry level of Bordeaux, but very, very famous family. So this is interesting, and I didn't know this until I was doing the research. This is not Léoville Barton. There is no Chateau Léoville Barton. This is Langoa Barton. So if you look at the label for Léoville Barton, it's actually showing the chateau from Langoa Barton, because that's where they make the wine. Different vineyards, of course, but one shared winemaking facility.
And of course, they promise to keep all the lots separate.
Yes, of course. They never, ever, ever mix, ever, because that's a lot.
And shouldn't we just be giving in? I mean, it's Léoville Barton. It's an Irish family.
Well, it's beautiful.
Let's just make it easier on us, all of us who don't speak French.
They own several properties.
They do.
This family, so and they manage them, and apparently they're quite different in style, which shows, you know, the interesting aspects of terroir here, because they're not. And again, just these, as you said, I like that phrase, the Léoville family of chateau here. They're all different, and this was one big estate, but it was a pretty big estate, so it's not too surprising that there's a different terroir. But the style of Léoville Barton is more, again, going back probably to Léoville Lascombes, sturdy, traditional, powerful, firm, needs a long time to develop. And apparently, I didn't look up prices for these because they'll just make me sad, but this is one of the more reasonably priced for what it is. So it was popular with collectors for a long time. I don't know if that's still the truth. But,
yes, when Léoville Lascombes hit the $400 a bottle range, Barton was still well under that. And I haven't checked the price lately, but yes, it was always more affordable.
And Chateau. Now, I would always say Gruaud Larose, but it's, technically Gruaud Larose. That vowel in the middle where you have to switch in your mouth without closing it. It's tough. Gruaud Larose. Beautiful picture there. Very long history, goes back to, there was a knight, Joseph Stanislas Gruaud. And it's today owned by the Cordier family, which is a pretty well-known family in Bordeaux. And another interesting fact that I found out doing my research, this is one of the few Bordeaux estates that still have a hail reduction cannon, which they will use when they feel threatened by hail. I don't know if it's ever been, I don't know if you know this, Ron, I don't know if it's ever actually been scientifically proven that it really does anything, but they still believe it does. It supposedly sends shock waves up into the clouds and busts up the hail. So what do I know?
I have no scientific data for you on that. I haven't done any research to find out if anybody studied it. It does sound so far-fetched, right? But a lot of times these things that sound so far-fetched, when you put them in practice, you find out, well, I can't prove it, but it seems to help. And even if it doesn't help, it makes me feel better because I'm doing something. Yes. And it's not nearly as effective as hail netting. I can assure you of that, but cheaper than hail netting and a whole lot more fun. Come on.
I guess it's when you're in traffic and you can get off the highway and it's going to take you 20 more minutes to get home, but at least you're in control. So you just do that. Yeah. The feeling of control is a uniquely human thing. But a pretty traditional style here again. Firm, tannic, needs a long time to develop. And moving on to Ducru Beaucaillou. That is an impressive building right there. This is owned by Bruno Bory, another well-known Bordeaux name. I didn't say this for every single one because it could get repetitive, but I did want to mention it for this estate. This is 70% planted to 70% Cab and 30% Merlot, which is not only a significant portion of Merlot, but it's just those two grapes. So interesting. Because if you look at the plantings of others, they do, the Gambit, there'll be a little Cab Franc, there'll be a Petit Verdot. And you don't see that with Ducru Beaucaillou. According to my source, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ron.
I was just going to say, in this winery, or these wines and Léoville Lascombes definitely qualify for this label of super seconds, right? If they were going to review the classification again, and these folks went through the same badgering process, perhaps, of Mouton. Maybe that's the best way to put it, is I just won't give up. I'll just bug you until you give in. I think this property and Léoville Lascombes would get elevated. And of the two wines, this is the more powerful of the two, a little bit more like Pauillac, a little broader shouldered, beautiful wines. So complete in that more powerful style.
Yeah, my go-to source for getting some verbiage about the styles of these chateaus, he absolutely loves the chateau. And he says they're at the top of their game today. And basically they have it all. They have the harmony of the structure and the purity of the fruit and the texture and the ability to age forever. And just he sort of rhapsodized about Ducru Beaucaillou. And so do you think they will ever revisit those classifications and maybe promote some people?
I hate to say never, because never is a really long time. I think that the economics of the situation no longer really require them to do so.
Right.
And I think, even though we're talking about Ducru Beaucaillou and Léoville Lascombes, I think the best example of why that is probably Lynch-Bages. That ever since, the Parker rating started to soar on Lynch-Bages, it went from the price of a fifth growth to the price of a second growth. So in the end, while it's nice to have the prestige of the classification, what really matters is dollars in the bank and and the value of your property. So, Ducru Beaucaillou and Lascombes, they get prices that are pretty darn close to first growths. And maybe they're happier consistently saying, well, yes, you've rated us at second growth, but we're overachievers, as opposed to first growth, where that's the overachieving doesn't exist anymore. You can't overachieve as a first growth.
Right.
So maybe there's a fun little mental game going on here, as well as I think to a certain point, when you look at the bank account and everything that's going on, you're like, yeah, whatever. And I think we've kind of gotten to that point in Bordeaux now.
So I could talk about, there's so many chateaus to talk about in Saint-Julien, but here's just a few others to think about. These are all class growths: third growth Langlois, Barton, and Lagrange; fourth growth Béchevel, Brenner, Ducru, Talbot, and Saint-Pierre, pretty small. Saint-Pierre actually supplies grapes to Château Gloria, which is an unclassified growth in Saint-Julien that I like very much, and I think gets a lot of attention. You're familiar with Château Gloria, I assume? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a wine that I would buy to keep Saint-Julien covered on wine lists without having to pay classified growth prices. And it was very interesting. In Michigan, at least, it became very popular, and the prices of Gloria became off-putting, and I had to go look for other things. And I often found a lot of really well-priced, even older vintages on Talbot, mm-hmm. and Brenner Ducru. And I used that to my advantage as a buyer many times, because the quality is very high.
Oh yeah.
And you put it in the realm of, normal mortals can afford those wines on a special occasion, even now. as opposed to the skyrocketing prices I was looking at back then. So I would tell people to go out and look for any of these, and you'll have a more affordable entry into the greatness of this region through trying one of these wines than the chateaus we showed in pictures.
Yeah, you just made me think of something. I can't say it's a fact because I have no idea, but I'd be interested to find out because, when you think of first growth to second, third, fourth, and fifth growth, you're like, oh, it's, way down at fifth growth must be, a huge quality drop off. And it's not. I mean, these wines are really good. If you're classified growth, you're probably a really good wine. And except for some of those properties that you just mentioned, the prices still kind of reflect where they're classed. So you can get, the prices drop off a lot more steeply than the quality does, I think. So it's something to consider.
Yeah, most assuredly. And remember that the classification happened in 1855, and a whole lot of history of winemaking and climate change has happened since then, which make it so that, it's not that hard. So while I've got the mic, we've got a question that came in from Mario. So when you say classic style, does it mean that someone like Michel Rolland with his, I think he's saying with his intrusive methods would be considered too modern or over the top? Ooh, let's get an argument going. Come on, TJ, let's fight. All right. So what do you think about that? You need me to read it again?
I think I get it, like the effect of the consulting winemaking. Yeah, Michel Rolland is certainly a polarizing figure to many, but I've come around on him quite a bit from what I initially thought. He's not what was the documentary that sort of painted him in a bad light? Anyway, there's a lot of consultants in Bordeaux. It's the wine consultant capital of the world, right? And there's a little bit of chasing points, especially if you're a not as well known a chateau and you want to increase. But what I more mean for classic style is, again, try within the appellations, because I think we talked about this last time, Ron, or certainly we've had conversations about it. You can change your winemaking to kind of do anything. You can obscure the terroir. You can make your Margaux taste like Saint-Estèphe. You can make your Saint-Estèphe taste like Margaux. But that's not the point, right? Mm-hmm. The point is to try, I think, to express the appellation. Well, maybe the point is to express the chateau first and then the appellation, or vice versa. I'm not sure which. So when I say classic, what I'm trying to say is representative of what people expect from that appellation.
Yeah, I think that's a carefully worded way to put it. And in Bordeaux especially, where brand is king, I mean, they it's not that they don't honor terroir, but it is a brand name driven wine market. It's all about the chateau name. And so there is an expectation of style when you say, I like Mouton Rothschild. It means that I like that fleshier, more new oak, riper style of Pauillac. If you in turn say, I like Lafite Rothschild better, you're saying, I like a less new oak, leaner, not quite as fruit-rich style of Pauillac. If you say, I like Latour over all of those, then you're saying, I like powerful, broad-shouldered, ripe, but not overripe styles of wine that I get some of the oak of Mouton, but I don't get the elegance by comparison of Lafite. And when you get into Saint-Julien, you're actually making similar arguments because even though Léoville family of wines, they all started as one estate. Who knows what the wine tasted like when it was just one estate, right? But each one of those offshoots then became its own entity in their view of what the interpretation of Saint-Julien should be over time. And I think that Léoville Las Cases is the most taught, most long-lived, capable of the three wines, with at the same time showing all the elegance you can possibly imagine out of a wine based on Cabernet Sauvignon from Bordeaux. And then you keep going down the thing. So we throw these words out with great danger, and Mario is wise to point that out, that classic to me doesn't mean classic to you very often. And it's a dance. even at the winery, I think it's a constant dance between what do people expect out of my brand,
Yep.
and what does the land offer me? And I would not say that the Bordelais are avoiding or misconstruing what the land offers, but it is a brand first appellation.
Yeah, and it made me think too about, en primeur. You have, experts, writers, buyers that have been going to this for decades, right? And they can taste these chateaux year after year after year. And I don't think you can do it to that extent with that many people anywhere else in the world. Burgundy is really a specialist thing. You can get lost in Burgundy. And there's certainly Burgundy experts. And you can taste Barolo and Barbaresco year after year, and there's certainly experts in that. But a large group of very educated palates are tasting these same chateaux and taking detailed notes and writing about it. And they have to write something. So if there's any deviation, if there's something to talk about, certainly that's going to get played up. And I think you nailed it. They have to keep their brand to the extent that the chateau represents this particular part of this appellation, tastes like this appellation, but it's well known for being a more powerful style of Margaux or a more elegant style of Saint Julien. That's what the chateau's known for. And I think part of that's their terroir, I'm sure, and part of it is we're known for the style. We are, we're always trying to improve our quality, but within that range, we have to keep what people are sort of expecting from us.
Yeah, and sort of like in my own experience, when I see the words Chateau Talbot, my brain registers purple satin.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like that's what I expect out of that wine. Because I've had it just enough times to have a real world expectation of it, right? And I think that means something, right? And it should. And California depends on the same thing. It's not that a little slice of Napa can't be really specific for a wine, but in the end, they're marketing the brand first and Napa second. And it's the complete inverse in Burgundy, right? It's all about vineyard site in Burgundy, and the overriding philosophy is that the winemaker is only a conduit to show the vineyard, and that's a different animal. They're marketing by vineyard. Bordeaux is marketing by brand. All right, we better move on, or we're going to be here all day.
So speaking of Chateau Gloria and value, we got to talk about this Chateau Martin, the second wine from Chateau Gloria, and something that we import here at Winebow.
Yes, I'm glad you reminded me of that. It's time to buy some and revisit it, because I've had it and it was delicious. And I haven't had it recently.
So there's a little bit, some facts. So as is typical of second wines, anywhere in Bordeaux, it's usually the younger vines that get put into the second wine. So they're generally a little fruitier, a little more approachable, a little early drinking, which is not to say they can't age, but maybe not for 15, 20, 25 years like the top wines can, but certainly very easily 8 to 10 years in a good vintage. And this is an approximate retail price. I don't want to quote me, but this is about around 45 to 50, depending on your market. You might find it a little less, you might find it slightly more, but check it out. Moving to Margaux. So very, very, very old history of winemaking here. There's 5 communes, which we talked about there. You can see the 5 communes there. Very diverse. So as you can see, look at the size of it compared to Saint Julien just above it. Much, much bigger. So you're going to see a lot more diversity in terroir. You're going to see a lot more diversity in style. There were top 10 facts. I won't read them all, but just something to think about. The warmest major appellation left bank. Makes sense. We're going south. The first appellation planted for vines by the ancient Romans. The only major appellation with a chateau named after the region, Château Margaux. What else? Home of the smallest vineyard in the 1855 classification. Château Ferrier is only 8 hectares.
That's really, really small. Really small. So back to the map for a second. I want to give you another logic train for why this is the warmest appellation. If you look at the Gironde estuary as it comes here to nearly the confluence, well, actually part of the appellation is right across from the confluence of the two tributaries. You have a much smaller body of water here. And so the influence of cooling from this much larger river up to the left and right, the upper left of your viewing screen, that's going to be a significantly larger heat dump and sink. So it's just going to be cooler anywhere near that body of water, especially if you think Saint-Julien is like, you know, there's parts that are really close to it. It's going to be much different. And then Margaux ranges way away from the water, as well as the fact that it's a much smaller river at that point.
Yeah, you can be really close, or you can be, you know, fairly far. And yeah, great point. You're moving south, but not too far south. But the estuary really narrows there, although it's still quite wide. I was like, when you look at the maps, you're like, oh, well, the Dordogne River is probably not that wide. It's a big river. The estuary, I've never been way up in the north there, but it must be impressive in size. One thing to note about the gravels here, we're talking about gravel soils on the left bank, very diverse gravels, if that makes any sense. There's all kinds of different sizes and different types. So you're getting a lot of interesting draining effects depending on where you are. And there we go. A nice, beautiful photo of the Margaux vineyards with that nice wall made from maybe some of the gravel they dug up. And there's some limestone here. There's some clay, marl. You know, pretty diverse soils for, you know, especially when we compare it to the previous appellation, Saint-Julien. There we go. Bigger production, bigger vineyard, as we expect than Saint-Julien. And has a little bit of everything here. Cru Classé, Cru Artisan, Cru Bourgeois, and 32 other crus, and 21 Cru Classé. Velvety and elegant is what I think of when I think of Margaux.
Yeah, the word sumptuous comes to mind for me.
Supple, elegant, you know, the elegant side of Cabernet, because this is mostly still Cabernet. We're not talking about Merlot. We're talking about Merlot and Pomerol. That's a different kind of velvet to me. That's you know, plush. This is that you know, that shows the side of Cabernet that we don't often think of, and that I've had from cooler climates, like in Margaret River in Australia, is a good example. Just that you know, there can be real elegance and finesse to Cabernet depending on the terroir and depending on how you make it, of course.
Yeah, and the tannin structures, we had this conversation prior to a couple of episodes ago, where tannin structure often helps identify regionality in wine, and Margaux tannin structure is just a little more friendly than its neighbors. Certainly more friendly than Saint-Estèphe and Pauillac. It's not that it's not there. Obviously, Château Margaux is a great example of how long these wines can really age. So it's not a fact that they lack tannin. It's just a better, it's just a softer feel to the tannin and not quite as attacking. And I think that that's one of the reasons the wines are so popular, is that they offer a kindness in the world of left bank Bordeaux. To an early drinking wine. And it's also one of the appellations that's really easy to say, right? Margaux.
Yes.
And how many times has a sommelier stood in a dining room when someone says, you know, I think I'll have a bottle of Margaux. And you go, really? And they don't realize that there's the Chateau and then there's the appellation. So that's happened to me more than once.
Open it. That could be a big mistake. But yes, and you made an important point. Just because the tannins are more silky and fine does not mean that this can't age. These wines, you know, the best wines from Margaux and the top vintage can age again as long as anything in Bordeaux. But they're just that those tannins are a little silkier upon release than you see in other areas. And there she is, Château Margaux. Dates back almost 1,000 years. And today it's owned by, I hope I do not butcher her name too much, and you can help me out with this one, Ron, because this is in one of your specialties, Corinne Mentzolopoulos.
I always have to see it spelled. I know they're a Greek family to help you out with that, but
Mentzolopoulos. I think I'm fairly confident that's how you would say it.
I'll buy it for $1. You know, the important part is that you can pronounce Château Margaux, more so than the owner's last name.
I've had Château Margaux once, and it's stunning. And in keeping with the name Margaux and the appellation, this is a very elegant, finessed style of wine. Lots of different, very aromatic, very easy. It's one of those wines that you start to nose it, Ron, and then you get lost in the nose and you forgot that you've been smelling it now for 5 minutes. You haven't even sipped it yet. This was a favorite of Thomas Jefferson. He was a big collector of Château Margaux back in the day. So even then, 1780s, it was considered to be one of the top wines.
And he apparently had a good palate, because the stuff he collected is still pretty awesome today.
Yeah, I always wondered if did he figure those out himself, or did he say, here, this is the best stuff? But he's written some fairly, for the time and for given that he's not a winemaker, some critical appraisals of the different wines. So
yeah. He tried to make wine at Monticello. His vines kept dying because he didn't understand phylloxera at the time. But I think that he was fairly refined in his taste and appreciation of the fine things in life, and his time in France as an ambassador didn't do him any harm, and he was rubbing elbows with all the people who had access to everything, and that gave him access as well. So thanks to him, we own the rest of the United States. So he never seemed to shy away from high-priced items like half a continent.
Yes, I believe he had some debt issues throughout his life, but oh well, he lived life. And there's now this is I don't know if this is controversial or not, but this is the third growth, and it's generally agreed to be one of the best estates in Margaux, and kind of leapfrogs a lot of things that are classed ahead of it. Château Palmer, or Palmer, if you want to say it that way. But I believe, since it's an English name, Château Palmer is okay. Colonel Palmer was the original person, and this was there's 22 different shareholders, of which I am not one, unfortunately, but the 2 majority shareholders, the Malherbes and the Seychelles family, who are negotiants. Again, pretty classic Margaux style, very aromatic, very elegant, very silky in texture. The source that I go to the most really emphasizes in a top vintage how textured this wine is, and silky and velvety, and I don't know, what's your experience with Château Palmer?
I think that nails it pretty well. I also feel like, because of the current ownership of this wine, that it's pretty modern, in the sense that we have this kind of thought of Bordeaux's having an earthy side, etc., and that's sort of been taken out of this wine completely. It's very clean winemaking and very measured in all of its approaches in all the right ways. The wine is absolutely beautiful. I've never tried a bottle, even in a weak vintage, that I didn't think highly of.
Beautiful building too. Château Brane-Cantenae, owned by the Lurton family. A little bit, even for Margaux, considered to be a little bit on the lighter, fresher side. I don't know if that makes it more modern or less traditional. I don't know. It depends on what you think of Margaux. But, a very, again, aromatic, maybe not as firmly tannic as some of the other properties in Margaux. Château Lascombes, or Lacombe, depending on how you want to pronounce it. This was, again, you go through the history of all the people that owned it. It was on the market. I can't believe I missed this opportunity, Ron. It was on the market for 4 years in the early 2000s, or the late aughts, if you will, before it was purchased on July 9th, 2011, for $300 million. So I think even if I had heard of it, I probably wouldn't have been in a position to do anything about it.
Yeah, maybe not, but you know, history, full stock of wines, vineyards already there, wineries already there, current price tags. Yeah, maybe it wasn't such a bad deal. It must not have been the great deal because it took them a long time to sell it, but maybe they were asking for even more than that, and that's where it settled.
Yeah, I don't know why it took so long. Right? That's a lot of money. But it was bought by an insurance company, and they're the largest insurers of health professionals, doctors and nurses, etc.
Is it owned by AXA?
It's Mutuelle d'Assurance des Services de Santé Français, MACF, La Mutuelle.
Okay, because AXA, multinational insurance company, owns, I don't know, feels like 30% of the Bordeaux Chateau. They're just massive, but who knows?
Some people apparently find this to be can find it to be overly oaky in its personality. I don't have experience with it to say one way or the other. And I would hazard a guess that with the ageability of this wine, that would be fine. You could just put it down and let it resolve over time. Let the wine digest the oak. A winemaker said that once, and I love that phrase, digest the oak. Because it does over time. If it's a good enough wine, there's enough fruit there. Any thoughts on Château Lascombes?
I have very little, if any, experience with it. Nothing comes to mind as far as a memory. Although I will say digesting the oak is always a relative term, right? There's only so much you can digest.
Yes.
But in great wines, it does become more harmonious with time, for sure.
Yes, the wine has to have enough quality and depth of fruit, of course, to have the appetite to digest the oak, and you can certainly overdo it. But I have seen it, and to the extent I've seen it in some wines where I've been amazed. I thought the oak would never resolve, and then at the right time, you're like, wow, it's all integrated now.
Changing gears completely, but I've had that sort of wow moment with Silver Oak out of Napa Valley, because it's all, I mean, their reputation is American oak, so it's a more obvious kind of oak, and they definitely don't hold back on it. That's their signature. And a couple of times I was exposed to some library releases of significantly older vintages, you know, like 25, 30 years or something like that. And I was floored by how well integrated the overall flavor was now compared to what you normally get when you first open them young. So yeah, it can happen.
Yeah, that speaks, I guess, also to the talent of the winemaker and the winemaking team, that they can project far enough. Like, I think that this wine can handle this level of oak, and I'm going to put it on. It's going to resolve. I guess that's experience and know-how. Château Rauzan-Ségla, another favorite of Thomas Jefferson. Apparently, you were 10 cases in one trip. And this was sold in 1984, and I believe it's still owned by the owners of Chanel. This for Margaux, again, within the constraints of Margaux and the appellation, this is known as a more powerful tannic style that needs some age to resolve. It's meant to age, and then once it does, it reveals all the complexity and the silky textures. But as a young wine, it can be a little tight. Again, from drawing on other sources, because I don't have too much experience with it. But I do have some experience with their second wine, Ségla, which is a Winebow import exclusive. Their second wine. Look at the plantings there, and this is just for the for the estate. That very varied for Margaux. Quite a bit of Merlot, almost bordering on half, which is interesting. And only sees a little bit of new oak, and again, ballpark figure for retail around $80 to $85. So for a top Chateau's second wine in Margaux, that's a bargain. And I've had this many times. I'm sure you have as well, Ron.
Yeah, I've had it a few times and I like it every time. But I like the analogy of Rauzan-Ségla being edgy when it's young. I would almost call it a more rustic view of Margaux. When you first taste it, you don't think immediately this is Margaux, or you'd push it further north for sure. More like maybe even Saint-Estèphe.
Wow, that tannic and that. Yeah, I haven't had as much. I mean, I've had it, but I don't have enough to really compare it. So I'll take your word for
You should never do that.
it. And again, there's a lot of other chateaus we can talk about that are very well known. Chateaus Saint-Gicourt, Kirwan is a great one, Cantenae Brown, Prieur-les-Chines, and the other Rauzan-Ségla is a very respected chateau. And of course, as you see, a lot in Bordeaux. That was one property back in the day that was divided. And anything on there that you feel the need to comment on?
I don't know, other than it's very interesting to me that because of the super well-known names at the very top of the list in Margaux, this part of the list often gets not talked about.
Yeah.
And especially Disson and Kirwan. First of all, Kirwan doesn't even sound like it's from Bordeaux, right? Where's that from? But there's some really nice wines in this list. And recently somebody brought to dinner here at the house, which I consider to be amazingly kind, a Prieur-les-Chines with about 6 or 7 years of age, and the wine was elegant and seamless and beautiful. And
yeah, I know that.
I don't know what they paid for it, because obviously I'm not going to ask, but it was great. We had a question come in, which could be a long answer. So I'm going to let you decide whether you want to talk about it this time or whether Mario tunes in next time and you can talk about it next time, because we're really pushing the time limit here. If you have some spare time, can you discuss the importance of Émile Pinault in France and more specifically in Bordeaux? I mean, maybe we should have an episode on Émile Pinault, because influential would be a minimum.
Yes, that's even an understatement. I'm not going to answer that today because I don't want to do injustice to Monsieur Pinault. I have his books, and honestly, I read a page and then I need to think about it for about half an hour. There's so much information there. His influence is you can never overstate his influence. And I think perhaps we'll do an episode of the consultants and the winemakers. We'll talk about Émile, we'll talk about Denis Dubourdieu, we'll talk about Michel Rolland, we'll talk about Stéphane de Renocourt. There's a lot to talk about that.
That sounds like more than one episode. And I think that would be a really great episode, and we should probably throw that in sooner, not later, because it really does affect a lot of these other areas we're going to talk about are drastically affected by the consulting market, because they're pulling these really well-known consultants out of these top chateaus and then putting them in these smaller houses, hoping to elevate their brand. And that makes no sense to us unless we understand who these people are. So I'm just throwing that out as my wish. You, of course, are driving the show.
I think you're right. I think what we'll do is then we have one more big important region for red wines to talk about on the left bank that is not in the Médoc, which is Grave. So I think we'll talk about that next time. And then I think the episode after that, I think you have a good point. We should talk about that and the influence it's had before we get into, because then we'll get into some of the great white wines of the left bank and the sweet wines of the left bank as well. So before we get there, we'll talk about the researchers, the professors, and the consultants, and we'll see if it's one episode or two. I'm not sure. A lot to talk about there.
You can always stretch it out when there's a lot to talk about. All right.
As I've been talking about throughout the episode, and I'm remiss for not mentioning this website prior to this, so I apologize. But the WineCellarInsider.com is a great resource. Jeff Levy is a Bordeaux expert and has decades of experience in tasting Bordeaux. And his website, I believe there's some subscription membership things you can do there, but there's so much content that he's just giving away for free there. So definitely check that out. And of course, MédocBordeaux.com is a good resource. And always for overall, Bordeaux.com is the main website that I always go to first. And this is the last, not the last of the 6 families. We're going to be in the 6 families for a while, but the last of the left bank major reds, because we're going to be talking about Gruaud and Pessac-Léognan in the next episode, which is in 2 weeks from today.
Same bat time, same bat channel. And this coming Tuesday, don't forget to join us for pre-shift, as Madeleine Truffon, Master Sommelier, and my professional mentor since I got into the wine industry, will be here to talk about her take on meeting the guest where they are. And we're going to transfer that to meeting the client where they are. And that's going to be a super fun discussion. So we'll see you on Tuesday for that. And then on June 22nd, join us for Gruaud and Pessac-Léognan all together?
Yeah, all together. Well, we're going to talk about reds. We won't get into the whites yet. But.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, TJ. Appreciate you doing the research and sharing with us, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye, everybody.